Peace to you. When asked to give a few words, I always take pause. Because it's quite a task. I could talk about the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center in terms of our origin, our history, being the oldest Muslim community in the city of Cincinnati, going back to 1943, and then progressing from there and talk about the various steps of our development up until now. But that story is a very complex story in terms of explaining to you how we got established under a man by the name of Elijah Muhammad, and how he brought to us an Islam that was Islam in name but not in content, that was correct in terms of its moral posture but in terms of its theology was not, moving on to then coming to the correct idea and picture and expression of Islam under his son, Imam W.D. Muhammad. Well, that's higher mathematics. And we don't have the time for that. But I will say, as a student of this process for some 43 years, I have come to see, without doubt, that our history is a case study in how God works in mysterious ways. So to be brief, again, it's said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Pictures of a great tool of eloquence. And to share with you what is, I think, most important about the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center, I'm going to offer to you a picture. And the picture that I'm going to offer, because today our topic is dealing with housing, the picture I'm going to offer you is a house. This house is a house that is situated in a city called Mecca. And it's a house that is said that was built for all mankind. It was a house that was built by our father, Prophet Abraham, and his son Ishmael. It's called the Kaaba. Many of you perhaps have seen various photos of it, what have you. But some call it the house of God, but only in the sense that God doesn't live there. But it's the house of God because it's really talking about the construction of a life that God created his human creation to live. That house is a symbol. It's a symbol, and when you see 2 or 3 million Muslims going there each year, in 2005 I was there and was a part of that mass of people that come there for that period of time called Hajj. That house represents that life, that common life that God has created for all human beings. But in that common life, there's such a diversity because people come from every corner of the earth. I saw people from everywhere. And the Muslims who are partaking of that represent only a microcosmic picture of how God wants us to see each other and function with each other as one human family in our diversity. So we just rehearse that and keep that orientation before us. And it's really when you see us making our prayers, when we're facing that direction, is to remind us of that orientation that God has for our life. So as one human family sharing a common nature and a common life, and that's simply called the human life. And the first article of faith for us is called Tawheed. It means the oneness of God, the oneness in the scheme of his creation, and the oneness of his humanity. It's beautiful, a diversified unity and oneness. And the diversity doesn't take away from the oneness. It enhances it. It beautifies it. So, again, our work, our chief aim at the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center, I would say above everything else, is to do our part, to do our work. Our book tells us, work you in your places, because God says, I too am a worker, and we can see his wonderful handiworks. There's no denying that. But we're working in our place to do our part to repair and to make whole again our fragmented family. Mankind, we're taught that mankind began as one human community, and we very much believe in the words, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. Would you now please join me in prayer? Dear God, do not let us be a butcher of sheep, and do not let us as sheep ever be killed by the butchers. Oh God, help us to speak the truth in the face of the strong, and help us not to lie to gain the applause of the weak. Oh God, if you give us wealth, do not take our real happiness. If you give us power, do not take our wits. And if you give us success, do not take our humility. And if you give us humility, do not take our dignity. Oh God, help us to see both sides of the picture, and do not let us accuse our opponents of treachery just because they have a different point of view. Oh God, help us to love people as we love ourselves, and to keep a check on ourselves as we keep a check on others. Oh God, do not let us become boastful if we are successful, and do not let us despair if we fail, but remind us always that failure is but the experiment that precedes success. Oh God, let us be gentle with others. Teach us that forgiveness is the highest standard of power, and that revenge is the greatest indication of weakness. Oh God, if you take our wealth, leave us hope. And if you take our success, leave us the power to overcome failure. Oh God, if we have wronged others, give us the opportunity to make amends. And if people have wronged us, give us the power to forgive. Oh God, if we forget you, please do not forget us. Amen.
Thank you so much. Now, we have a few items of business before we get to our program. The minutes were posted sent along with the meeting notice. So are there any corrections that anyone would like to see to the minutes? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes of our May 9th meeting, which was Alice Skirtz's presentation of her new book, Econocide, Elimination of the Urban Poor. So moved. We have a motion to accept the minutes. A second? A second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. Now, you have the agenda in front of you. Are there additions to the agenda that are necessary? All right, I'll accept the motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Second? Second. Thank you. All those in favor of approving our agenda say aye. Aye. It's approved. I'll now introduce Peg Fox, our Executive Director for Marcc, who will give us some updates and announcements, and also introduce our program presenters.
Okay. Is the sound coming through okay? Yes. No tweets or anything like that? Okay. Good afternoon. We have more handouts, I think, than we've had meetings this year, but that's okay. So I'd just like to go over the newsletter briefly. As everybody knows, immigration is one of our two social concerns, and has been in 2011 as well as 2012. So we're trying to educate our membership on issues of immigration for the most part. In light of that, in the last page of the newsletter, we have information on the World Choir Games. And the reason that's there is it's an opportunity for congregations to come out for 2 weeks, listen to some very beautiful music in many different languages, get to rub shoulders with people from many different countries, and begin to feel comfortable with differences in terms of ethnicity and race in ways that they haven't in terms of housing, for example. So we would appreciate if this could be passed along in church bulletins, congregation bulletins, judicatory, special judicatory email, just to support this. We will be having 15,000 additional people in the city for a 2-week period. So that's why we're suggesting. There's posters, flyers, brochures on the table, and that's our reasoning for asking you to pass it along. We also have an article on secure communities in cities, several cities across the country who have decided not to participate. So I encourage you to read that article, as well as articles interviewing a couple of immigrant families and some of the challenges they've had since they've arrived in the United States. Now, I want to leave plenty of time for questions, so I'll move on to our panel today. We are fortunate to have members from the Affordable Housing Advocates for Affordable Housing with us today. Alicia Townsend, Kiafi Rob Moyo, and John Schrider. So I'd like to introduce them individually, and then they'll come up and begin the presentation. Alicia Townsend is a commercial real estate loan officer and consultant at the Cincinnati Development Fund, and certified as a housing development finance professional by the National Development Council. CDF is a nonprofit lending institution which underwrites and provides community development services and real estate loans. And as a result, there's creation and preservation of affordable housing and revitalization of urban communities. Alicia serves on the AHA board, as does Marc, and we're fortunate to have her here in her busy schedule. Kiafi Ram Moyo is a marketing strategist with 14 plus years of professional marketing and consulting experience. Ms. Moyo was selected to produce key strategic initiatives for affordable housing advocates. And what I found was really interesting in her bio is that she's passionate about community building and is proud of the contributions over time to the Shoe Bank and its Shoes for Haiti recycling collection drive for 6,000 plus shoes. She's been involved in a variety of other things too, and she is working on communication strategy for AHA. John Schrider, probably most of you know, is director of the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio. John has been at Legal Aid for decades.
Only 3.
And I met John when I was a community organizer for the Northside Outreach Center for Catholic Charities. Our first working together had to do with a tenant strike at Ashwood Village, and so we go way back. But John has been at the forefront of a lot of the initiatives that Marc has been involved in, particularly the Housing Bill 408 and Senate Bill 280, and all that organizing he has done around that, as well as the tenets of public housing. So without further delay here, I'll have Alicia Townsend come up and say, okay.
Thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and key this up. And we added to the handouts that's on the table, so we do apologize first for that. One of the things that you'll have that John is going to speak to is the Affordable Housing Advocates 2011 Housing Report, and that is the thicker book that details and information that John will share with you.
Let's see. I'll talk loud until we can see if we can work this. My voice does carry, and the acoustics in this building are superb. So I don't even know if we'll need the mic. But if you need me to speak up, just let me know. We also put on the back table 2 copies of the PowerPoint presentations that we're going to do for you this afternoon. One is entitled Everybody Knows, and the other one is the report on the housing study. So one was near the left end of the table, and one was near the right end of the table. But we wanted to give you those so that you could follow along and or pass on to your members and to others. The third bit of information that we left on the table are 4 individual posters that talk about affordable housing and the Everybody Knows campaign. And we also put a sign-in sheet. And Kiafi will talk a little bit more about that at the end. But we're asking if you took the posters, that you would also post those, but you would give us your name and your information so that we can track where those posters are being placed throughout the city. So without further ado, everybody knows. Are you going to come here? Yeah. Oh, Sarah has it's just the colors on there. Can you reach it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just so that we can blind everyone. So everybody knows. What does everybody know?
Well, the rumor is affordable housing lowers property values. Anybody heard that?
That is just not true. And actually, studies conclude that affordable housing not only doesn't lower property values, but has insignificant or positive effects on property values in higher income neighborhoods. And it actually improves the property values in lower income neighborhoods.
Well, there's a lot of rumors out there, and the word on the street is that affordable housing residents just do not fit into our community.
What?
That's what I heard.
Oh my goodness. Affordable housing residents are already a part of our community. They look like me, they look like you, they look like our seniors. They look like Jenny Jenkins, who recently completed her MBA, who's a single mother of 2, who just recently purchased a home in Northside. They look like students, they look like teachers, they look like factory workers.
That's good to know because there's a lot of rumors out there. And the rumor is that affordable housing leads to an increase of crime. Now, I'm sure many of you all heard that.
Really? Really?
That's what I heard.
Really? I'm not buying it, Kiafi. I'm not buying it. And actually, what really impacts crime is community disinvestment, overcrowding, lack of jobs, and lack of community services. There's actually no correlation between safe, decent, affordable housing and crime. Truly, truly a bad rumor. As a matter of fact, affordable housing actually transforms vacant and blighted properties.
Well, there's a lot of things going on around in regards to affordable housing. And another rumor that keep the room mill busy is that affordable housing is ugly and run down.
Ugly? Run down? Does that look ugly and run down to you? That's a picture of Villas of the Valleys, a multiple phase affordable housing project in Lincoln Heights. To me, that looks pretty nice. And as a matter of fact, affordable housing, because of the sources of funding, often have more stringent planning and zoning requirements than market rate projects. And it is privately owned and designed, and it's built to fit into the community character.
So what would our world look like if everyone really knows and knew the truth about affordable housing? That's exactly what we are aiming to do, is to empower the community with the correct information about affordable housing. The Everybody Knows campaign is targeted primarily towards the faith-based community and also young people between the ages of 16 and 24. And we have messages such as affordable housing is good for everyone. We want to put a face to affordable housing, and so you'll see in some of our marketing materials where it says, I am affordable housing, as a picture of a veteran. We want people to know that those that are already part of our community are also taking advantage of affordable housing. We also have the message of where we live matters, and that every family needs a safe place to live. And so with the tools that we have, we're asking you to help to spread the information. Again, you have the 2011 housing report. We also have video PSAs that are running on Time Warner Cable community access channels, and also the big Jumbotron down on Fountain Square. We do have our PSAs that are running like 5 to 7 times a day. So look out for those things in those areas. We also have recently partnered with the Elements Hip Hop Arts Center, and they're helping to form additional PSAs that will be played on the radio, and then also video PSAs that will get some additional airtime. And we have billboards that will be going up around the city as well to help push this message. If anyone is in social media, we do have Facebook, and also we have Twitter, and we're putting out some important information about affordable housing, and we're asking people to retweet and share that information as well.
And if you're like me, you had to have someone teach you how to tweet before you could retweet. And that's okay. One of the reasons we're targeting that group of individuals that are 16 to 24 is because we want to get that positive messaging out before those individuals become homeowners and they're listening to that naysay neighbor or Uncle Bob or Aunt Jean who says, no, you don't want them in your backyard. So we are really focusing on reaching those group of individuals who in effect are our future and will be the future voters, to impact them and to help them have a positive image about affordable housing, to help dispel those rumors about affordable housing. So we want you to become, and to help us to become an advocate and learning all that you can learn about the truths about affordable housing. Thank you. We'll do questions at the end, John. I'll get you all booted up. Next slide.
Is this a local campaign?
It is local to the Cincinnati area.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. AHA, Affordable Housing Advocates, has been around a very long time, but this campaign is a new campaign, and we are very proud of this campaign. We really think that it's time for we in Cincinnati, including all of you and many other people around the community, to get together and to really think and talk about the importance of there being good affordable housing for everyone in our community. This report, which we completed in conjunction with the campaign, is another thing that we're very proud of. It's a professional piece of work. We worked with graduate students putting together the information. We think it's a very good summary of the issues related to affordable housing. And I hope you take copies and look at them and pass them around. And what I'm going to do today is just hit some of the highlights in this report and hopefully inspire you to take a further look at it. So, the basic concept here is, what is affordable housing? And space bar. There we go. Thank you. What is affordable housing? Well, the first thing I want to say, just to carry on with the theme from Kiapi and Alicia, is affordable housing is a good thing. It's a good thing for the people who live in it, and it is, if you do it right, a good thing for the community. It's about economic development. It's about improving neighborhoods, and I think that's something that we really have to recognize. One of the things that we do in our study is set some definitions. And the basic definition we have in answer to the question of what is affordable housing is, well, it's housing that costs not more than about 30% of a household's income. And housing that costs more than that creates a great strain on the household in terms of their ability to have other necessities of life. The lower your income is, the less leeway you have. And there are a lot of low-income people, unfortunately, in the greater Cincinnati area. There's a high poverty rate, and on top of that, there are many, many families who are very close to poverty. unfortunately, that's been the case for a very long time, and it's been exacerbated by recent economic conditions. One of the things that I just wanted to focus on real quickly is the idea of what is the need for affordable housing in our community. You know, it's true that the vacancy rates have gone up in housing in greater Cincinnati, particularly in Cincinnati and some older towns. And it's also true that there are quite a few apartments that rent for what seem to be modest amounts of money, $500 a month. And so some who look at the housing situation say, well, if there are apartments out there for $500 a month, what's the problem? There really isn't a need for affordable housing. But let's think about that for a second. What does that really mean? In order to afford an apartment that costs $500 a month, a household is going to need to have an income of about $20,000 a year. How much is that an hour? If you're working a full-time job, $10 an hour. How many jobs are out there now that don't pay $10 an hour? So to say that there are modest cost apartments out there just tells part of the story. And the other thing is that in my experience with legal aid and working with the city of Cincinnati and others, much of that housing that rents for $500 a month or around $500 a month is, we're talking about one-bedroom apartments or apartments that are in very bad condition. And so, you know, we have a big problem with affordable housing in Cincinnati. There's no doubt about it. And a few more things on that big point. I still don't hit the right button, do I? We're going to skip this one. This is too complicated for me. One of our great writers put that together, not me. Subsidized housing. Well, it's a good thing. Did you know that only 1 out of 3, or 3.5 actually, but we'll say 1 out of 3 households that is low income gets government assisted housing? So for every family that lives in public housing or has a housing choice voucher, there are 2 families that do not have that. And those are the families that are living in apartments that they can't afford or in bad condition. One way to illustrate that point is when the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority recently opened their waiting list for housing vouchers about a year ago. 19,000 households showed up applying for those vouchers. And would you like to know how many vouchers the Housing Authority was giving out that day?
Yeah.
0. None. These people were just getting on the waiting list, and they were going to have to wait to get a voucher until someone turned them in. There's been almost no increase in the amount of assisted rental housing in the Cincinnati area for about 15 years. So, you know, I think really those are 2 of the 3 main points that I really wanted to focus on today. And I do know that we want to get into a dialogue with you on this topic, but I do want to just highlight a few other issues before we start talking. I referred to substandard housing. It is a major problem. We have an aging housing stock in the Cincinnati area, and if anything, we need to double and triple the amount of money we're putting into redeveloping our housing in our communities. The foreclosure crisis continues to be a major problem. If you're hearing anything optimistic on TV, radio, or other media about the foreclosure crisis possibly getting better, think twice. It's unfortunately still killing us all, and it's going to be with us for quite some time to come. Many of the foreclosures affect people who are tenants as well. It's not just homeowners who are suffering as a result of foreclosure, but also tenants. Other housing issues that the report talks about, homelessness, obviously a huge problem. You heard from Josh Spring recently, you heard from Alice Gertz recently. There was a family homelessness study that Alice and Josh and others worked on recently that I'm sure you've heard about, and is really an excellent report. Other issues that we need to be concerned about, transportation and its relationship to where people live and the affordable, how they can get by, access to jobs and places with jobs and education and things like that. And then, almost finally, accessible housing. As the population ages, the need for accessible housing is increasing. The need for accessible housing to be used by people with disabilities has always been a major weakness, and we need to do much more to address that need. And then finally, we can't really talk about housing issues in our community without thinking for a moment about discrimination and segregation. I'm sorry to say that Cincinnati remains one of the most segregated communities in our country. It's ranked number 8 right now by most studies. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 7, but it's whatever number you see in the study, it's bad. And we still have much work to do. I know that Marcc has taken on that issue in a very helpful and important way in recent legislative efforts related to House Bill 408 and Senate Bill 280. We have a long ways to go. We've made some progress. There are some communities that are stable and integrated, but we have a long way to go, and I know you know that. And I just think that we at Affordable Housing, along with Marcc and many other members of the community, need to get together. Then, if I may, one final thing. Yesterday, the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority announced that they had hired a new executive director, Greg Johnson, the former director of the Dayton Metropolitan Housing Authority. He has his work cut out for him, and I think that we all have to get together and try to help him to do his job so that we can see the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority and its housing programs in our community as a positive thing, providing good housing and helping communities. So I think that we have an opportunity now, in spite of the difficulties of the housing authority here in Cincinnati, to work with the new director and try to turn things around. Thank you.
I'll assume that's the end of our formal presentation. Okay, so we're now open for questions. It would be helpful in terms of our minutes to identify yourself as your junior. Yes, here, table.
George, I have a question. The units that you showed there in Lincoln Heights on the side of the old Valley homes, are those all owner occupied or as part of the rental property?
The first phase was rental, and now they've moved on to the second phase, which is home ownership.
Yeah, I noticed there was a sign there on Wayne where they're having 2 3-bedroom houses that are for sale, or one of them for sale, I think one's already sold.
Right.
But the original building there was all rental.
Right, and now they want to have a mixed community. They redeveloped the community center, the senior housing, which is what you saw a picture of, which is the rental. And then they're moving on to the home ownership unit. Correct.
It's a great example of positive affordable housing developments. If you haven't gone out there to see it, you really have to go. There are single-family homes that were built, townhouses, a total of about 90 units of rental housing, and now some units are being built for home ownership. It's a partnership. Legal Aid works with the former nonprofit organization that owned Valley Homes. This is replacement housing for Valley Homes. It's on their home site. We work with that organization that owned Valley Homes. Many other organizations, CDF, Model Management. It was a team effort, and it's a great example. You really have to see it.
Ariel.
Ariel Miller, Principal Dice. I have a comment and then a question. I'm really glad about your putting a face on affordable housing campaign. I think that your slides debunking the myths would be stronger if they all had citations. Some of them don't, and we, of course, believe you, but I'm prejudiced people who are good. It may be impervious to facts, but it isn't Question for Mr. Schrider. I remember a few years ago that some of our deacons were trying to get legislation passed that would give tenants 90 days notice if there was foreclosure on a building that they were renting in. and the state legislature was resisting that. What has happened?
Well, the good news is that there is a federal law that accomplishes the same thing, and that law has been in effect for a couple of years, and it's scheduled to remain in effect for quite a while, at least another year or so. So we do have that 90-day notice protection that's in effect. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everybody who does foreclosures is following that law, because they're not. And I think that's another challenge for housing advocates and their supporters to make sure that the financial institutions who are in the business of foreclosure follow these rules and give the tenants the protections that they're legally entitled to. So our efforts paid off, not in Ohio, but in national legislation.
Further questions? Yes, sir.
Hart Edmonds, Presbyterian Cincinnati, and Pastor Kennedy Heights. There were some visitors of my congregation interracial on Sunday. We were having a conversation about the issue of segregation and the statistic about Cincinnati. Here's an interesting question. I wonder how you would respond. I don't know how I attempted to. But when I mentioned this statistic, someone said, well, maybe folks just prefer to live in segregated communities that are poor. I wonder how you would respond to that, and what kind of resources you might suggest, any of you, on how to raise consciousness level of folks.
Well, I think all of us might have something to say. All three of us will have something to say about this. What I'll say is that there has been a survey work done, social science research done on that topic, spread out over a very long period of time. And certainly it is true that there are some members of the minority community who aren't all that excited about living in the white suburbs, and that's totally a good thing. That's their right. But what the survey literature shows uniformly over the years is that minorities, particularly African Americans, are far more interested as a group, most of them, in living in integrated settings. And unfortunately, their white counterparts, you know what I mean? The white folks aren't so happy about that idea still, is what I'm trying to say.
I think people are creatures of habit and are more prone to do what they're used to doing. But I think it's a huge opportunity for the city, and I mean I look for. I have been myself. I've been living as I've moved to other cities. I've actually lived in other cities and states, at least 5 other cities and states across the country, and I found myself to be in pretty mixed communities, and so I think it's just an individual choice.
I want to push back on that. It's individual choice to live in communities that have substandard housing, and you can't find a way out. I mean, that's the feedback I was getting from the conversation I was having. People prefer living in segregated communities. And the interesting factor there is that a lot of these segregated communities, particularly those who are economically challenged, don't have ways out of that. And the services available in some of these communities are very limited. So why would anyone want to choose to live in I'm asking for help to how to raise consciousness about that particular rumor response.
I actually think it's a lack of choice. People want to live in communities that have decent schools, that are near where they work, that have a grocery store, that has services that support their needs and has access to the things that they like to do. And I just believe that is true of most people. That's what you're looking for when you're selecting a community to live in. So I think it's really the opposite in some cases, that an individual does not choose to stay in a rundown area, town, or apartment. It is because of lack of choice and lack of resources that they are there. And in our city, it is because of the lack of opportunity as far as affordable housing. A lot of times, and often you're hearing stories about affordable housing units coming online. Well, those are not an increase in the number of affordable housing units. That is simply preserving or returning a unit that had been vacated, that had been shut down. But I think probably in the last 15 years, we have not seen an increase in affordable housing in Cincinnati. We've actually seen more of a decrease. And so I really do think you choose to live where you live, but I really don't believe anyone chooses to live in substandard conditions. If they have the resources and the means to live in other places. Now, I do believe you would want your community to be revitalized. So it's nice to be able to stay in the community that you're in, and when you have that redevelopment that is taking place, to be able to be allowed to stay in your home while that redevelopment is going on, and to be a part of that new revitalized community.
Mark, you had a question.
Yeah, Mark Panazzo of Miami Baptist Association. The Hope 6 projects, where you take that situation, it's been, from the outside, it appears to be an opportunity to, oftentimes, the current residents who are relocated elsewhere never get back in to that community. Has there been any studies in terms of the success, or what's the final evaluation regarding the Hope 6 projects?
I'm not aware of any specific study. I can tell you, I'm a resident of the West End. I built a home in City West. Cincinnati Development Fund is one of the main lenders on the Laurel and Lincoln project. So I have personal views and opinions, that type of thing, but I'm not sure if there's been any studies that have been done to support whether it's working, it's not working. I am an advocate that mixed income and mixed use communities and neighborhoods do work. It takes time, it takes work on all parts to get that right. And one of the downfalls in our community with our Hope 6 project is we had the economic downturn, which further exacerbated some of the negative issues that were going on. Now, from a resident's perspective, as far as people who have been displaced, many of the residents that were good residents, that were good neighbors, are still within the Lincoln and Laurel area. So some of the residents that were displaced, that were not allowed to come back, were neighbors or individuals that probably need some more education on how to become a better neighbor, no matter where they may live.
If I could add also, I know a lot of the people who live in City West and in Liberty Street Apartments who were former residents of Laurel Homes, and they reported the old CMHA projects that they replaced. And I've known a lot of those people for a lot of years. The project was a good idea. It hasn't worked out as well as everybody would have liked. In answer to the question about studies, there are national studies about who got to go back to housing in Hope 6 projects, and the studies do include Cincinnati, and the picture is not good. Many families who were promised the right to return did not receive housing, and it's really, really unfortunate. City West was supposed to include an additional 300 units of housing, a mix of home ownership and affordable rental housing that never got built. And that's just part of the picture of how that project would live up to all of our expectations.
John, the study, the Cincinnati portion of it was done by LISC, low income, whatever that is. And the standard by which they could judge all of them around the country was buildings. And that misses the point of loss of units and the quality of life for people who did not get to return. We lost 25% of our assisted units, whether bachelors or buildings. But it's an interesting study, and there unfortunately wasn't much to compare it across the board for different locations. ours didn't come out very well.
Other questions for our experts? Tiffany?
Tiffany, Presbyterian Cincinnati, and I don't think we've covered in this with delegates, but is it, I thought it was 88% approximately of housing, affordable housing is concentrated in city proper and not in townships. Is that, I was kind of thinking of Hart's question, and that need for those, I know the 208, 408, or the numbers are kind of discreetly addressing those in a negative fashion, but I think that's partly the concern in terms of choice. I'm not sure I'm remembering the percentages right now.
Well, if I can, I'll say something about the percentages. There are two main housing programs that we talk about. One is public housing, and one is housing choice vouchers / Section 8. Now, approximately 90%, about 89% of public housing in Hamilton County is in the city of Cincinnati. So only 10%, 11% of public housing is outside the city of Cincinnati in Hamilton County. The story with housing choice vouchers, Section 8, is a little bit different. Right now, about 80% of that kind of housing is in the city of Cincinnati, and 20% is in the balance of the county.
Let me try a question. The myths have been around for ages. I mean, I have a few years behind me, and I can remember in the 60s and the 70s having to try to deal with those in the housing group in Akron, Ohio. What are some of there's some new strategies as we talk to people across the country to sort of step out and try to address some of these more forcefully? What's happening beyond Cincinnati that might be sort of a model for our community?
And honestly, I'm not aware of anything new that is happening outside of Cincinnati. I think the things are similar. And one which is that really guided our campaign was to reach the youth, was to be able to plant positive seeds in that age group. Because that age group, those people tend to be the trendsetters. And they have the ear of their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles, their parents. And so when you come to that dinner table and mom or dad says, oh, well, I hear they're doing some affordable housing down the street, and dad's response is, oh, that's going to be a problem. Our hope is by reaching that younger group that they will be able to say, well, Dad, this is what I learned in school about that, or this is what I've heard about that. Because a lot of people, you listen to your next door neighbor, you listen to that favorite aunt, your father, your mom, not as much, at least my daughter does, but you listen to, and what the kids are doing, they listen to one another more, unfortunately or fortunately, than they listen to us. And so what we really wanted to do was to reach that group, plant those seeds, give them those positive messages so that, one, they can impact their parents, those other significant adults in their life, and then as they grow, they're growing with that positive messaging. They have something to dispel the myths. They're not out there and all they're hearing is the negative, but they have an opportunity to hear some of the positive.
I have two questions and they're unrelated. First question is regarding foster children aging out of the system. Does your campaign, is it dealing with some of those young adults? And the second question is, can you talk a little bit more about the connection of development and the lack of replacing the affordable rental units?
I'll take the first one. I'll let John take the second one. In regards to the campaign, and it's a good point that you make, the campaign does not specifically reach out or target that group, but that is that age group. We are working with Elements. Are you guys familiar with Elements? Yes. Okay. So we're working with Elements to put together a PSA. And with the kids there, But we can explore that, because you're right, that is that age group that's being, and I hate that word, emancipated from, but that's the legal word that is used, emancipated from the foster care system. And often, they are just left to fend for themselves with very limited resources. And I could go on and on.
I'm just thinking that maybe it may work for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
There's a need.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, the question about redevelopment and replacement housing is a really tough one. And let me try to answer that with giving you a really tough example. Whitten Hills, next to the Elba landfill, there are 1,500 units of subsidized rental housing as you go up the road there, the hill next to the landfill hill. And if we tore down all that housing and tried to redevelop it, maybe some on that side, although I don't know why you want to do that, but elsewhere, I can guarantee you, because of the current budgetary situation, we would end up with far less housing. So, those developments were a mistake. They shouldn't have been built next to the landfill. But there's no easy answer about what do you do with them. Fortunately, we have some examples of better success. I think the Valley Homes, Villas of the Valley, is a good example of success. But I want to be straight with you about that. Valley Homes had 300 units, and we're going to end up with 100 units in replacement. Valley Homes was falling apart, had to be torn down. I don't even want to talk about all the things that were wrong with it, but you end up replacing it far less.
And that's almost always the case. It's never one-for-one. Never. It's almost the opposite, where you get 1 unit for every 3 to 5 that you may have had.
Further questions before we... Okay, thank you, panel. Thank you, Townsend. Good morning. Thank you for your inspiring words. We have one other item before we adjourn. If I can have your attention. We normally do not hold Delegates Council meetings in July and August. Now, we probably, on safer ground, we could probably do that as an actual motion. So, is there any discussion on that? Not reconvene our Delegates Council until September. Satisfied. So I'll accept a motion to so move. And a second. All those in favor with not meeting again until September, unless under emergency occurs, say aye. Aye. Very good. See you in September. Have a wonderful summer. Thank you for coming today.
You want to stop busy, I guess. Okay.